97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with Geoff Mosher, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast.
I love coaching this football team. I love coaching those players in there.
Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, which dropped today at 6 a.m., and brought to you by PlaySugarHouse.com. Sign up now. They'll match your first deposit up to $250. Geoff Mosher is back from the Inside the Birds podcast. And, of course, he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline as the Eagles at the break. We've talked a lot about some of the things this week. We got a poll question up today I want to get Jeff's take on in a couple of ways. Jeff, welcome back, man. How are you?
Good to be back. I'm good. How are you guys doing today?
All is well. I know this bye week, but this bye week seems to have flown by here, and we've had a lot of interesting topics regarding, Wentz and whether he will finish career here. One of the things that we have up today that a lot of people are voting on and engaging with us is if you could vote one guy out of the Eagles organization, Roseman, Pederson, or Schwartz. And I guess the question is, who would you vote out? It's not who would you vote out, but which of the guys, if any, if this team doesn't make the playoffs in this horrible NFC East, would any of those guys be in some trouble?
Yes. I mean, it could be any. It could be all. I doubt it would be none if they were to not make the playoffs. I think of those three that you mentioned, I mean, it would almost have to – we'd have to see how they didn't make the playoffs and what the breakdowns were. If you go through this first half, 3-4-1, clearly the quarterback has been an issue, and so a lot of that falls on Doug. Some of the overall team construct falls – I mean, a lot of the team construct falls on Howie. The injuries kind of happen, so it's hard to blame that on a particular person. But Jim Schwartz, in fairness to the other two, his defense has not played very well this year, although you can definitely make an argument that he was not given great pieces at certain positions. They did give him Darius Slay, the cornerback that he's never had since he's been here. They also gave him some of the probably the worst group of linebackers that he's ever had and maybe that there is in the league as well. So they did give him an upper echelon defensive lineman who hasn't played great. I say this because I don't think the Dallas and the Giants game should cloud people from the reality of what the first 6 games looked like and how often they gave up at least 24 to 30 points in those games. Whether you're talking about the Bengals or the Steelers or the Ravens, whether you're blowing a lead and giving up 24 unanswered points against Washington, he has, I think, over the last 2 weeks, kind of flown under the radar, right? With everything being on Doug and Carson. But I definitely think that he's someone who would have to be concerned about his job if the Eagles didn't make the playoffs.
I'm going to kind of look at some of these guys. What is your take on, number one, your take on Roseman and the job he's done post-Super Bowl? Because we've looked at a lot of different rankings. And he is consistently ranked by his, contemporaries and peers as one of the top 5 GMs in football. And I think when you say that to Eagles fans, it drives them nuts. And, we were going back and forth about this, about what Roseman's good at, what he's not good at. Is he too highly regarded? Why is he so highly regarded? How do you feel he is perceived post-Super Bowl?
Well, that's a tricky question to answer because a lot of the issues with the franchise over the last few years go back to the 2017 draft that predates the Super Bowl. They won the Super Bowl that year, but that draft, in retrospect, there were a lot of misses that put him, thin in areas, the following year and the year after, and here we are. So I think you have to count 2017 altogether. Yeah, he made some tremendous one-year signings, especially that year, veteran signings. And the year before, I believe that was the year he brought in Brandon Brooks and Rodney McLeod. So that's a feather in his cap. But he certainly has made a lot of personnel decisions either in draft or in free agency or in trades since that have not really worked out the way the team wanted it to work out. And I think this past draft also, with the taking of two players on day two that just are not contributing much right now, and were seemingly looked at around the league as curious picks at those positions, which then may hurt them going forward, not just this year. It kind of evens out some of the really good things that he's done. I've always said Howie does some things very well. He does some things not so well. I don't think he's great. I don't think he's terrible. I think he's good at things. I think there are things that he's always going to be deficient at. And it all tosses into the cauldron. And, I think, he's been here a long time. So this is 10 years he's been as GM, except for that 1 year that he was cast aside. So that's a long run for anybody in the NFL at that position. So certainly if things bottom out, I think the things that I talked about that he's not good at become amplified, and maybe ownership makes a decision to bring in a new voice. We'd have to see.
Yeah, that's where I was standing with him. It's like, just because I think, hey, maybe it's okay to get fresh in there, it doesn't mean Howie Roseman is horrendous and garbage and doesn't know what he's doing. But sometimes something runs its course and you can go in another direction just to freshen things up a bit. I want to get your thoughts on something Sal Powell said to us around 3 o'clock that really stood out to me. He said he thinks the next 8 weeks tell the future of Carson Wentz. What are your thoughts on that quote?
Yeah, I think that's somewhat fair. But the only thing is that what's the story, right? If they're 4-4 compared to 2-6 compared to 6-2, so that's a roundabout way of saying if they do really well down the stretch, he put it together and he probably maintains his job. If he goes 2-6, I think the concerns are amplified, whatever concerns that we have now, and then again, that might lead to organizational changes, and you have no idea when new people come in what they're going to do with the personnel here. And then if they're 4-4, well, then that's kind of like that's when it goes to the owner, and the owner has to make a tough decision about how much is going to change, if any, or not. So I do think anything is on the table here over the next 8 weeks.
Now,
I'm sorry, over the next 8 weeks.
Now, what if they win the division, they're 6-9-1? Is there reason to believe that changes are coming? You've won the division. You've made the playoffs 4 years in a row. You've won the division back-to-back years, albeit 6-9-1 doesn't seem all that impressive. But do they look at it and say, you know what, it was a tough year, injuries, COVID, we'll do it again? Or 6-9-1, not good enough, even though we won the division? Well,
I would say just based on Jeffrey Lurie's recent history here, that 6-9-1, he's not going to count the playoffs as some kind of feather in the cap. He's going to see that they won a Super Bowl. They came back the next year, went 9-7, made a change. Came back the next year, went 9-7 again, won the division, made a lot of change, right? A lot of different coaches in here now. Maybe not big changes, but he made changes. And then to come back and go 6-9-1, I think he's going to look at 6-9-1 more than we played a playoff game. Now, maybe if they go 6-9-1, win 3 playoff games, or back in the Super Bowl, that's a different story. But that's a very unlikely scenario. I think he's going to judge the record for what it is. And his recent history is if they don't progress, if they regress, then he makes changes. And so we'd have to see. I would think at 6-9-1, he would make changes.
Is a change of just Jim Schwartz an impactful enough change to say we did something? Last year they did the offensive coordinator, right? That was kind of like, all right, we did something. Is the next step Jim Schwartz will make a change there before it gets to Doug Pederson? In other words, like Pederson's won the Super Bowl. How many years does he have before he's the guy that they start to look at? And I'm not saying that I'm just, asking out loud.
Well, it's a fair question. It sounds like you're asking a fair question about, are you just rearranging the furniture on the Titanic, or are you actually trying to fix the ship? And that's a great question. That's hard to answer right now, right, Mike, without really knowing what's going to happen. But I can only just stand by the fact that if they really bottom out, if they don't make the playoffs, they finish several games under 500, that I can't see Jeffrey Lurie just being, this is a COVID year, nothing's going to happen. Even if all that happens and the only thing that changes is the defensive coordinator, I think I would be surprised about that too.
Right. It's like Sal Powell earlier said, so far he's hearing no negative assertions of Wentz, Roseman, and Pederson, the jobs that they're doing at that 3-4-1. In other words, there's nobody in that ownership group hitting the panic button because of what they've seen. And I'm not saying that's somewhat of a surprise, but it almost feels like they're saying injuries have been a big problem for this team, and that they're kind of using that as kind of like a crutch, maybe.
I don't know. I would hope not, because if that's the case, I mean, injuries were really bad last year, right? And they made a ton of changes when they did not finish with the record that they wanted to finish with. So, I mean, injuries have been really bad this year, probably for every other team, or many other teams, I should say, as much as the Eagles, as opposed to the last few years where it felt like the Eagles were leading the league in injuries by a mile. So I don't think that they can let that cloud their judgment. And I'll just say this. Remember at the end of last year, you go back to Doug's press conference. He says, I'm keeping my coaches. I'm keeping my wide receivers coach. I'm keeping my offensive coordinator. And then someone asked him about Jim Schwartz, and he didn't answer it the same way. Oh, Jim's out, interviewing for a job, and when he gets back, we'll have a talk. And everybody thought, man, that was kind of a weird non-endorsement of Jim Schwartz compared to the passionate endorsement of the assistants. And then the assistants wound up getting fired and Jim Schwartz stays. So that's always been in the back of my mind, that it was a very weird 2 or 3 days there going on with what you were hearing coming out of the NovaCare conference, both, behind the scenes and in public. So
can you refresh me on, was Pederson Schwartz's guy? I mean, was Schwartz Pederson's guy? I mean, did he hire?
They were not. Doug Pederson did not hire Jim Schwartz.
Okay, and what sort of relationship do they have, I guess? I mean, you're right. You never hear Pederson really be like, Schwartz is our guy. He's the, I feel like there's do they ever sit in a room together and have a cup of coffee and go over the game tape?
It's a good question. I have never heard behind the scenes through sources that Doug Pederson views Jim Schwartz negatively or with a jaundiced eye. I have not heard that. I think I've talked to you guys before. I've heard that people in and around the organization sometimes wonder what Jim's doing, and have criticized his lack of adjustments or the style of defense that he plays that can be kind of predictable, right? We talk about that all the time. But I've never heard personally that Doug Pederson has a problem with Jim Schwartz. So, but to go back to your original point, when they fired Chip Kelly and cleaned house and they were looking for new coaches and everything, Jim Schwartz, to my knowledge, was really Howie Roseman and helping Jeffrey Lurie. Let's go find one of the best defensive coordinators we can get who are out there, because Doug Pederson was not a guy who had a lot of knowledge about the rest of the league. He was not someone who could tell you here are the 6 really good defensive coordinators out there, especially unknown guys who can come in the way Andy kind of always saw Jim Johnson, that linebackers coach, and really liked his scheme. Let's bring him in. It wasn't like that with Doug. So they needed Howie to steer Jeffrey toward who was going to be Doug Pederson's defensive coordinator.
How impactful do you think one solo, legit offensive coordinator job title would be next to Doug compared to what they're doing this season?
I'm sorry. What did you? I don't understand what you're asking.
Having an offensive coordinator next to Doug Pederson, one guy, an offensive coordinator like they had in 2017, compared to what they did this season with all of the cooks in the kitchen, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's just verbiage, right? If you still have 6 guys there and you just change one guy's title to offensive coordinator, does that eliminate the 5 other guys? No, it's Doug's offense. He's the play caller. These guys were brought in for ideas. Press Taylor was promoted because they feel like he's good at his job and can, should be the passing game coordinator. It works in other places. San Francisco went to the Super Bowl last year. They had a passing game coordinator and a running game coordinator, but at the end of the day, it's Kyle Shanahan's offense, right? So I don't think any change in title is going to change the dynamics that are going on in the offensive classroom.
That's fair. And I also want to follow up with this. When it comes to play calling and Doug Pederson, do you think that it's possible that maybe he gets that taken away from him at any point, just based off of some of the offense that you've seen, this season that's been underwhelming to some?
Yeah, I don't think that Jeffrey or Howie is going to do that. And those are the only two people who could do that. Might they recommend it? Maybe, but I doubt it. I think, and Andy Reid did this once himself, I think if there's going to be a change in play calling, it's just going to be Doug saying, you know what I'm doing isn't working. So go ahead, Press, or, go ahead, Marty or Rich Gangarel. Who knows who? I imagine Press by title, but I have no idea. But if you're asking me if I think it's going to happen, it's not going to happen. I don't see it happening. And in fairness, I think Doug looks at all the problems that he's had, but he says, you know what? We scored 28 against the Ravens or against the Steelers. We scored 29 against the Ravens. There have been some pretty good scoring games for us, along with some offensive pitfalls. And if we just didn't turn the ball over as much as we're turning the ball over, then we probably would have even more chances to score points. So, he's never going to throw Carson Wentz under the bus that way, but I don't think Doug looks at the offense and the point totals and thinks that his play calling is specifically the problem.
I was wondering in that, as you were answering that, is the progression, though, you go, the next progression sometimes is you get your play calling stripped from you.
Yeah, but that has to be done. The only person that's going to strip Doug Pederson of play calling is Doug or nobody. I don't think Howie or Geoff is going to do that. I really don't. I know that Adam Gase did it a couple of weeks ago, right, when they played Buffalo. And it was his decision. He gave it to his offensive coordinator, Dual Loggins, I believe is his name, because he just felt, something's got to change. Maybe it'll be better, and it wasn't. So I just don't see Jeffrey or Howie intervening. I don't think they've ever done that before with Andy, and I don't think they're going to do it with Doug.
Geoff Mosher, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Don't forget the Inside the Birds podcast drops tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. with some more insight and analysis on this Eagles team, kind of looking over the Eagles at the halfway point. And, let's take a look at some of the things. I think Carson Wentz, this erratic play is at the top of the list. And we talked about, okay, are these next 8 games kind of like a referendum on his future here? But why has he been so mysteriously erratic when you look at tape and you talk to people? Are people saying, no, this stuff is fixable? Are they noticing this is why he has played so up and down?
Well, I think there's a number of reasons. I think he's erratic because he turns the ball over a lot, and I think he turns the ball over a lot because he makes bad decisions. Why does he make bad decisions? That only, whatever's going on in Carson's head is only known by Carson. I look at Carson on tape, or I'll talk to someone who's smarter than me, like Greg Cosell, and they'll tell you about decision making. When you're out of the pocket and the defense is about to hit you, throw the ball away. He's actually thrown the ball away a lot this year, just not enough. Taking sacks. There are times where he's in the pocket and there are receivers open and he's not pulling the trigger. So he's not seeing the picture clearly. Is that the coach's fault? I don't know. I'm sure they bring it up to him. Is it Carson's fault? You know what? It's one of those strange things. Some quarterbacks are they see the play develop as it's happening, and some don't. And there are times where it feels like Carson does, and times where it feels like he does not. And I think even more recently, when he's in the pocket, he seems to be very jumpy. And part of that jumpiness makes him really good about ducking under traffic and getting away when the pass rush comes up on him. But it's also leads to him not really being able to have his feet set and making that throw. And when he does make a throw, you'll see his front foot lock a lot of times, which makes throws go high. That really stands out to me, including the Dallas game. Everything he threw to receivers in Dallas was high, and you've seen that a lot all year long. Travis Fulgham, thank God, he has these tremendous high-pointing abilities, because it seems like 2 or 3 times a game he's got to use them to his advantage. I don't know if you guys remember that. I think it was a third down pass that Greg Ward dropped over the middle against Dallas that was in his hands, but in his hands after he jumped up to get it. Carson sails a lot of passes high. It's been that way all year long. It's probably was there last year as well. And in fact, I remember when he was a rookie, he did it too. This has not been something that the coaches have been able to correct with him.
That's funny. That's the throw that you and I were battling back and forth on. And Ward needs to catch that ball, but the problem is, like, yes, he needs to catch it, but just throw it to his numbers so he doesn't. So it's not even a question.
Yeah, I mean, both things can be true. You know, Jalen Reagor could have had that ball caught, but because he also was turned around. Maybe if it's placed a little differently, then it's a touchdown. But you know, receivers have to help out quarterbacks. Quarterbacks have to help out receivers. Greg Ward's a little guy. You know, you put that ball up in the air and make him jump, he could get it, but you may also get him, you know, his clock cleaned. So yeah, you get it. The quarterback can help him out by putting him at the numbers instead of at the head.
Jeff, not a lot of times they do self-scouting at the break. They're at the halfway. It's a perfect time for their bye. If they're looking over personnel and looking at changes, do you see any personnel changes coming for the second half of this season to say, all right, we looked at this for the first half, we watched film, let's try this as we come out of this bye? Any major shifts, changes, personnel decisions that are going to come when they play the Giants next Sunday?
Well, I do think you're going to see them try to get Reagor on the field more and into the offense more. And now, you know, when he was first starting earlier in the year, he was the X receiver. But now that Travis Fulgham is not giving that up anytime soon, you're going to play Reagor at the Z, which means probably a little bit fewer snaps for John Hightower, who could use a little bit fewer snaps anyway. And as he kind of continues to make his progressions there, you'll see Ward in the slot in those three receiver formations. You'll probably see Reagor moved around a little bit more to get him functioning in space. You saw that two of his catches against even the touchdown against Dallas came from him kind of either motioning out of the backfield or across the line of scrimmage. I think they're going to try to incorporate that a little more. I'm really curious to see when they get Isaac Seumalo back, because I know earlier in the year, I felt that they were able to do a little bit more with their running game as far as some of those Shanahan-style concepts of misdirection where you may have a guard and another guard pull one way, but the run design is the other way, or a guard and a tackle pull to the left, but the run is to the right. All that stuff that you see Shanahan do on a daily basis. But that seemed to have kind of slowed down after Seumalo went out, and they've been playing guys at guard like Opeta and Herbig and Pryor and really just trying to make it through every game. So perhaps you'll see that. And maybe I would think, especially if things don't change very much with Carson, that you'll see a little bit more Jalen Hurts built into the offense, perhaps even giving him the chance to take over the offense for a series instead of just an occasional like rotational snap here and there.
All right. Most people, think 6-9-1 might be good enough. That would be you beat the Giants, the Cowboys, and Washington. But for you, what is your best case scenario record-wise for this team?
They can beat the Giants, perhaps beat the Browns. I'm just going to call Seattle a loss right now. Packers, Saints, Cardinals, huh? Best case scenario, maybe you win 2 of those. So 4. And then you got Cowboys and Washington again. I mean,
and New York.
Best case is you can win. Yeah, well, New York's the first game out of the bye.
Yep.
Maybe 6 more wins is the best that they can do, I think.
6 more wins.
That's really optimistic of me to say, I think.
You think? I would agree. Like,
well, you asked me best case. So
Oh no, and like I look at it, if you have to win the 3 NFC East games. If you can win 2 of those 5, that's probably, for me, I agree, the best case scenario. I would say 5 more wins for me would be best case.
I got 8 wins total. That's the max.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Inside the Birds podcast tomorrow, dropped this morning at 6 a.m. Check that out. They'll have a new one on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Anything happening over the weekend? I know you guys have a bye week, so there's no pregame show. Do you have anything that our listeners should be waiting for this weekend?
No, we'll have a Inside the Birds TV interview with Todd Harriman's dropping maybe later tonight or tomorrow. So make sure you check that out on the Inside the Birds YouTube channel. And it was a really good one. Talked a lot about offensive line technique. So if you're an O-line junkie and you really get into things like hand usage and foot usage and positional versatility, Todd was really good breaking down Jordan Mailata's first few games, Jason Peters, where he fits best at. What you do with some of these guys when they get healthy, when Seumalo comes back, who plays left, who plays the other guard spot. So it was really interesting stuff.
All right, that is at Inside Birds. Get that on Twitter. At Geoff Mosher NFL, Adam Kaplan, Greg Cosell, Trey Thomas. They do the pregame show. No Eagles this week, but of course the Inside the Birds guys are back with us for Football at 4 all next week. Andrew's here on a Monday show. Jeff, enjoy the weekend, pal.
You too, fellas. Have a good one.
And he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Football at 4 is brought to you by PlaySugarHouse.com. Sign up to match your first deposit up to $250. Go to PlaySugarHouse.com and win real money with their sports book along with casino games from the comfort of your home. Must be 21 or older to play. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER.